In southern New Mexico, a sea of white gypsum stretches to the horizon, blinding and silent, one of the strangest deserts on Earth. Beneath the shifting dunes lies something older, the flat gray floor of a lake that vanished long ago, Lake Otero. On that cracked gray mud lies a single footprint, bare, human, pressed clean into the clay, exactly where nothing like it should be. It is not alone. A trail of prints runs across the old lake bed, one clear step after another, a walk frozen in stone. Some prints are small. On this shore, people once carried children, a figure crossing the flats with a small child on one hip. A footprint in soft mud should last a day before wind and water erase it. This walk should have been gone by morning. Yet the prints are still here, sharp and unmistakable, waiting on the dry lake bed as if the walker had passed only hours ago. When scientists finally asked how old this shore really was, the answer broke almost every rule about the first Americans. In all, 61 human footprints were found, layered through 8 separate bands of sediment, one above another, spanning many centuries of visits. Pressed into the same clay were the seeds of a water plant called rupia, sealed both just above and just below the prints. Those seeds worked like a page marking a date on both sides of the walk, and radiocarbon read that date clearly. The reading came back at about 23,000 to 21,000 years ago, when the last ice age still gripped the continent. 23,000 years. Not a single print, but a whole shoreline of them, far older than anyone was supposed to find in America. To understand why that number is impossible, the story returns to a rule that governed American archaeology for almost a century. For generations, the textbooks were certain. The first people reached the Americas around 13,000 years ago, and not one day before. They were called the Clovis people, named for distinctive stone spear points first unearthed near the town of Clovis, New Mexico, in the 1930s. For decades, the story allowed only one door into the continent, a narrow, ice-free corridor that supposedly opened around 13,000 years ago. Anyone who claimed older dates was treated as a heretic. Reputations and whole careers were built on holding that line firmly in place. But walls like that crack. The first real breach came far to the south, at a quiet site in Chile called Monte Verde. In 1997, a panel of archaeologists accepted Monte Verde at about 14,800 years old, older than Clovis allowed. That single verdict cracked the old certainty. By the new century, most researchers had quietly let go of the strict Clovis first rule. But Monte Verde was 14,000 years. White Sands was different, not a step past the rule, but a leap of 10,000 years. These footprints sat about 10,000 years older than the rule allowed, deep in a time the continent should have been empty. If the dates held, White Sands would be the hardest blow yet to everything the textbooks had promised about who came first. So who left them? Not a lost race, not mysterious builders, not visitors from the stars. The prints tell a far simpler story. They were ordinary people, families walking an ordinary shoreline, on a coast the official version had long insisted was completely empty of humans. And they did not come just once. The layered prints show people returning to this same shore across at least 2,000 years. And most of the prints are small. The majority were left by children and teenagers, moving along the water's edge again and again. For a moment, the empty lakebed fills with life, young feet on wet clay, a shore full of people who should not exist. And they were not alone on that shore. They walked among giants, enormous animals whose own tracks crossed theirs in the ancient mud. The age is real, confirmed and reconfirmed. But it opens a far stranger question. How did anyone reach this shore at all? When these tracks were made, the only road into America was sealed shut by ice, and no one has explained how they got in. Before that road could ever be traced, a stranger question came first. How does anyone even find a footprint older than the Ice Age itself? The answer begins not in a laboratory, but with a park ranger, white gypsum, and prints that surface only when the ground turns wet. David Bustos, a biologist for the National Park Service at White Sands, New Mexico, had noticed something on the flats for years. He called them ghost tracks, faint impressions that surfaced only on damp gypsum, then vanished as the ground dried. He had watched them since about 2005, prints that showed after rain, then faded within the hour. The gypsum hid an old lakebed. Rare floods and winds scoured the vanished shore, exposing its surface, then burying it again. That vanished water had a name, Lake Otero, and its dry floor was a ledger of steps, waiting to be read. Then, around 2009, a wet morning gave him something he could not unsee: a human footprint beside a mammoth's track. Two travelers on the same ancient surface, a person and one of the great beasts of the Ice Age, together. A find like that was beyond one biologist to prove. Bustos needed someone who could read fossil footprints like handwriting. That someone was Matthew Bennett of Bournemouth University, a specialist in ancient tracks. In 2017, he examined the prints and confirmed them. The full study reached the journal Science in September of 2021, a ranger's patient eye, now among the continent's oldest human records. Among the prints, one trackway stood apart, a single line of over 400 footprints, running nearly a mile out. One person, one steady stride, the whole way out. But something about the shape of each print was subtly, insistently wrong. The edge of each print bulged to one side, warped into a curve. The scientists gave it a plain name, a banana. It was not one odd step. The banana repeated, print after print, the same warp bending the same way along the whole walk. What bends a footstep like that? The scientists offered a careful reading, a body carrying extra weight, balancing on one hip. And the clue held a direction. The banana marked only the outbound trail, every print on the way there, none on the way back. Then, beside the long adult stride, something small appeared, tiny footprints, a child's set into the gypsum along the line. The reading almost writes itself. The child was carried, set down to rest, then lifted again, the small prints appearing only at the pauses. On the return, everything changed. The stride was even and light, the banana gone, and the small footprints did not come back at all. The simplest explanation is also the most human. The child was carried out, set down beyond the tracks, and the walker returned alone. Who carried the child? Here the scientists refused to guess. Their words are exact, a small woman or perhaps an adolescent boy. Nothing more. No gender, no name, no story beyond the ground. Only a single errand, out and back, across a mile of open lakebed. But honesty demands a caution. This particular walk was dated on its own, and it falls later, about 10 to 13,000 years ago. It is younger than the deepest layers, no proof of the impossible age. This walk shares the shore, not the day. Yet the deepest layers, the ones that reached 23,000 years, held tracks too. And the human prints were never alone. Pressed into the same horizons were prints far larger and deeper. One belonged to the Columbian mammoth, a southern giant, not woolly. Another belonged to a giant ground sloth, slow and heavy, clawed, roughly the size of a car, leaving wide round prints. And the human tracks cut across the trails of these giants, one surface, the smaller feet pressed against the enormous ones. This was no guess from bones in a cave, a shared world in one surface, people and megafauna, at least 2,000 years. It was a clean, quiet story, almost perfectly whole. And that was the problem. Too clean, some scientists would soon insist. An extraordinary claim invites an extraordinary attack. If the dates held, they broke the oldest rule in American archaeology. So other scientists set out to break the dates instead. What if the footprints were real, but the age was wrong by thousands of years? The entire timeline balanced on one fragile thing: the tiny seeds of rupia, a water plant that lived beneath the surface of the lake. Radiocarbon dating reads a seed like a clock, counting backward from the moment the plant last drew carbon from the living world. But a plant living underwater does not always drink fresh carbon from the open air the way a tree or a flower does. Some lakes are what geologists call hard water. They carry carbon far older than themselves, dissolved out of ancient stone underground. A plant that drinks that ancient carbon is, in a sense, born old. Its seeds can read thousands of years older than they are. This is the hard water problem. A clock that looks precise, yet may have started ticking long before the plant was ever alive. In the journal Science, 4 researchers made exactly that case. The hard water effect, they argued, could have aged the footprints by thousands of years. It was a serious charge raised by Madsen, Davis, Rode, and Oviatt, yet it was a warning, not a verdict. They had named the danger without measuring it, pointing to a possible flaw, but stopping short of proving the clock was truly broken. 2 years later, a separate team went further still. Rachel and his colleagues put an actual number to the doubt. By their estimate, the footprints might be at least 7,500 years younger than the impossible age first announced. Still, nothing was settled. No one had proven the dates false, yet no one could any longer call them beyond all doubt. But the team behind the footprints had not been careless. They had seen this objection coming long before it ever reached print. They answered in the same pages of Science, point by point, giving no ground and offering no retreat. Pigatti, Springer, Bennett, and their colleagues laid out the reply, a formal response, printed beside the very comment that challenged them. The hard water risk, they explained, had been no surprise. It had been weighed and tested well before the first dates were ever published. Their case never rested on seeds alone. It stood on independent evidence, in the rock, in the water, in the layered earth itself. Geology, the flow of ancient water, the stacking of sediment, the pattern of many dates, each strand pointed toward the same deep age. 4 separate objections had been raised against them. One by one, the team took each apart and answered every one in turn. Nothing about this happened in secret. The fight played out in the open, on the printed page, argument set directly against argument. This is how science is supposed to work, not a cover-up, but a public contest, where every claim must survive the sharpest reply. The critics were not enemies of the truth. They were doing science, pressing on the weakest joint to see whether it would hold. When the exchange finally ended, the number was still standing. The age had not been overturned. It had survived its hardest test yet. About 23,000 years, the same impossible figure, now scarred by open argument, yet still standing unbroken on the page. And yet, a defense made point by point is not the same thing as final, unshakable proof. Doubt has a way of lingering. An argument can be won and still leave a shadow behind it. A single clock, however well defended, is still a single clock. There is only one way to truly silence that kind of doubt, not to defend the clock again, but to build others beside it. Clocks that keep time by an entirely different principle, that know nothing of seeds or lakes or ancient dissolved carbon. If those other clocks agreed, the doubt would have nowhere left to hide, and that is exactly where the story turns next. And so they built them. 3 clocks in all, each read from a different material, each blind to what the others would say. The first clock was pollen. Grains of ancient conifers buried right beside the footprints, sifted from the mud and counted by hand. 75,000 grains, counted 3 times over to be certain nothing modern had crept in. The pollen answered near 23,000 years. The second clock was quartz. Every grain of sand carries a hidden timer. Quartz remembers when it last saw the sun. Here the grains had lain in darkness for over 21,000 years, sealed from daylight beneath the layers that held the tracks. The third clock returned to the original seeds, the same rupia grass, retested in 11 separate batches. They settled near 22,000 years. 3 clocks, 3 different materials, 3 separate paths to a date, and statistically, their answers could not be told apart. This was not one lucky find. It was one age, drawn 3 independent ways from 3 unrelated things buried in the same ground. Then a 4th line arrived, 55 radiocarbon dates, read from the lake bed itself, along the eroding cliff, in 2 more laboratories. They mapped the whole column of sediment, the footprint layer included, and every date fell inside the very same window. 3 clocks, 4 laboratories, 1 narrow band, 21 to 23,000 years. Not a happy accident, but a consensus that had already survived attack. Relic States follows questions that refuse to close, the ones the evidence keeps prying open. If that is a story worth following, subscribe. And here the date stopped being the mystery. Knowing exactly when only sharpened a far harder question, how anyone reached this place at all. The footprints fall in the coldest stretch of the Ice Age, a time when most of the world's water lay locked in ice. A single sheet of ice ran from the North Atlantic to the Pacific, sealing North America off from Asia. The land door was shut. And yet the tracks are proof. People were already here, walking south of that ice, long before the door had swung fully closed. They came before the ice sealed the way. But the road they walked to get here, science cannot yet name. The study points to no single answer, not the famous ice-free corridor, not a journey along the coast. It simply leaves the route open. The door was locked, and the route stays honestly open. No conspiracy of silence hides it. The answer simply is not yet in hand. The question had turned on its axis. Science now knew, by 3 clocks, exactly when these people stood here. And for all its certainty about when, it still did not know how. The when was solved, the how walked on. For many native peoples, the dates confirmed something their oral traditions had always held, that their ancestors had been here since time immemorial. Their answer to the discovery was quiet and unsurprised. We have always said this, the science had simply arrived at the same place. Some of those traditions describe walls of ice, giant beasts, and floods pouring from melting glaciers, not against the science but beside it. Representatives of native and Pueblo communities took part in the White Sands work, tradition and evidence meeting on the same ground. So the story returns to where it began, a flat plain of gray mud, and one long line of human tracks pressed into it. On a shore like this, someone carried a child nearly a mile through the clinging mud and set small feet down beside their own. That particular walk belongs to a later day. It shares the shore, not the oldest layers. The ancient thing here is the shore itself. For the shore itself held people for at least 2,000 years, families returning again and again, and children carried across the mud. The child was carried the whole way, lifted onto solid ground. But who they were and where they walked left no lasting trace. And how a people first stepped onto a continent locked in ice, the tracks keep that secret. Science knows the when, the how walks on.